Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player that gets so angry that he literally kills the Dungeon Master's pet. A story about a wizard player that can't stand another player doing better than them, and much more. But before we get into that, let's meditate a moment with Simba to help protect us from the cringe that these stories are sure to induce. There we go. Now I think we are ready for some D&D horror stories. Dungeons & Dragons player kills my pet lizard. By Reddit user forward@7696. I was playing Dungeons & Dragons as the DM with a group of people I thought were friends. Most still are, but one of these players legitimately fills me with a rage and sadness that, even to this day, I can't even describe. One of the players was your typical self-centered Mary Sue, who wanted the whole campaign to be about him. He loved this character, an orc druid. He wrote a 5-page backstory and demanded that we all read it, and he would unironically tell me things like, "This campaign is boring. Imagine if we decided to make this campaign about orc druids' rich backstory. It literally involves a lich. All we are doing right now is looking for some hobgoblin war chief." So you can imagine when his precious orc died, along with another party member who wasn't a total psycho man baby, after prematurely trying to confront the hobgoblin war chief's mummy, despite the party warning him that this was not a normal mummy. He said he didn't care and just wanted to, quote, "get this over with." He threw the typical tantrum when the mummy killed him, accused me of having a DM versus party mentality, said that I'm a bad DM, etc. Then he started getting more belligerent and threatening to kick my ass, and then escalating to death and rape threats. So my husband obviously started hearing this meltdown and came out and, in no uncertain terms, told him to leave the house before he regrets it. Orc's player then just looked like he was ready to fight him, until my husband just kinda gave him the F around and find out look. So he backed down and stormed out, but not before passing my Tegu's tank. He was a baby, so he still lived in a tank, but my husband was in the process of basically turning our backyard into an enclosure for him, for when he got bigger. I loved that little lizard and spent hours with him every day. If you have never dealt with a Tegu, you may not understand, but they are just about the most doggo-like reptiles out there. And this still pains me to this day, but that bastard, as he was leaving, violently shoved the tank to the ground, and then as my lizard tried to run, he stepped on him. I broke down immediately in hysteria. I could not stop crying as my husband just violently grabbed this piece of crap and tossed him out of the house, as the rest of the party helped him. And all I could do is hold my dead little friend and cry. We called the police, but they basically told us to go to small claims court and or get a restraining order. Our police department is kind of crappy where we live in general, so this unfortunately was not a surprise. But it felt like a sick joke to me to put a price on that little lizard in some small claims court. Plus he was a rescue, so I didn't buy him. I know it may seem silly, but this event just really destroyed me. That campaign abruptly ended, and I haven't played Dungeons & Dragons or any tabletop RPG since, and I doubt that I ever will again. And the rage I feel for that lowlife who would kill a defenseless animal over a effing D&D game is overwhelming. TLDR. Scumbag gets angry that his stupid character dies in Dungeons & Dragons, gets belligerent, and kills my real-life baby lizard. Wow, what a scumbag. Being a spotlight hog and a man-child with main character syndrome is one thing, but to then lose your crap and to make those threats after his character died is another. It's no wonder that OP's husband told him to get lost. Then to push OP's pet lizard's tank over and step on him is just downright evil. I don't care what form they come in, whether they be fluffy or scaly. Anyone that has a pet can attest that they are part of the family, and that bastard just essentially killed a member of OP's family without any remorse. And what is with the police saying that all they could do was take him to small claims court? I would classify what he did as cruelty to animals, so why couldn't they charge him on that? So my deepest condolences to OP, because I know what it's like to lose a pet, and it always sucks and hurts a lot. I also hope that OP eventually feels up to playing D&D again at some point, but it's totally understandable if they don't. Seriously, some people are just evil. Let's move on. I feel so disrespected as a dungeon master by my players. By Reddit user Chameleon179. I just finished the campaign, and it has been rocky for me to say the least. I feel super unsatisfied with this campaign as a whole, and I've grown really frustrated with half of the group, 7 players total. I've had quite a few issues to the point where I decided to start ending my 2-year campaign because I couldn't deal with it anymore. So, my most recent frustration. I ran in-game one-shots until the group could all be together for the final session. And in the middle of my combat, one of my players looks up the monster I'm using and starts shouting out, "Oh my god, it has this many hit points, and this is the challenge rating?" Literally, while I was in the middle of playing this creature's turn. I just went cold in shock that she actually did this. She even has Dungeon Mastered before, and somehow thought that this was okay. I honestly wanted to cancel the session right there. And maybe I shouldn't have called her out right there, but I was so upset that she did something so disrespectful. I ended up getting a message later on from her about how she didn't appreciate being called out in front of everyone, and how it hurt her feelings. But honestly, if she hadn't done it in the first place, her feelings wouldn't have been hurt. Look, I've got mental health issues of my own that I try really hard to not let affect the group. And with all the frustration from that group I've had, I've done pretty well for the most part to not react poorly. But I am not perfect, and they are aware of my issues. So I don't understand why they can't cut me a little slack when they're the ones who essentially cheat and upset me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being ridiculous and over-focusing on things, but I'm just so incredibly angry about it still. I don't think OP should feel bad at all about being upset. This was supposed to be the grand finale of the campaign that they were running for these players. For the one player to look up the monster and interrupt OP in the middle of combat could not only be considered cheating, but rude as hell. By the sounds of it, this wasn't a one-off either, as OP alluded to half of their players doing stuff like this in the past. I would say talk to the group before running any more games for them, and bring up these issues. If the problem players don't want to seem to change afterwards, perhaps just play with the other half that don't give you any issues. Though, what are your thoughts on this one? Let's move on. Wizard has a meltdown over my combat performance. By Reddit user Hiker17. It's a rare thing that I get to be a player in a game, but when I get a chance once in a blue moon, I usually jump on the chance. Let's meet the cast. DM, a chill dude with a cool homebrew world and extensive house rules. Me, playing a sorcerer fighter multi-class. Wizard, the problem. And the others, who are not important to the story, but consist of barbarian, rogue, and monk. I'm the kind of guy who likes to roll for stats, and the dungeon master advocated for it at the table, so I rolled up a sorcerer fighter. My stats were okay, decent strength, dex, and charisma, albeit with an abysmal constitution of 7. I was a bit of a glass cannon. This was later rectified with a magic girdle that increased my con to a 16. I wanted to roleplay my stats, so I made my character similar to the literary character Elric of Melnibone, a sickly, weak albino who needed drugs and elixirs to keep going in day-to-day life. While we were making our characters, I took a look at the spell selection, which the Dungeon Master had catalogued to fit with his world and lore. Wizard asked about some spells that were not on there, but the Dungeon Master told him that they didn't really fit with what he was trying to do. Wizard grumbled, since he'd wanted to take Silvery Barbs, but went along with it. I wanted to build my character to be a real spellblade kind of guy, so I selected spells that reflected that. The important spells here are Inflict Wounds, part of my homebrew undead bloodline, and True Strike. The Dungeon Master had homebrewed it as a first level spell, giving +10 to hit and ignoring disadvantage, but still needing an action to cast. Wizard thought that my choice of spells was crap, but I just ignored him. The game starts. We meet in a temple where a cleric tells us that a beast of chaos has been rampaging through the lands for weeks now, and that they need someone to lay it low. We agree, go after it. So far, so Gucci. We get into combat against some winged apes, and I use a spell slot to cast True Strike. The next round, I decimate an ape with a surefire hit of Inflict Wounds. Wizard is doing okay, but he's annoyed that his spells aren't hitting as much as he would like. Seeing me do well on the front lines, despite my comparatively low HP, was also a point of annoyance with him, and the fact that my character needed to shop for alchemical components to make his magic drugs before we left. I did my best to be chill with Wizard, but he was becoming more passive-aggressive by the minute, and it was starting to affect me too. We encounter the beast, and a fight ensues. I'm critting thanks to my champion subclass. Barbarian is having a great time being thrashed around by it. Rogue and Monk keep their distance, and all is well. Wizard makes a few comments about me going down in a second, but I keep avoiding hits thanks to a good amount of AC, which Wizard is also annoyed by. Then I hit it with another True Strike empowered Inflict Wounds, Action Surge with my Bastard Sword, just a homebrew better longsword, and crit it for like 50 damage and taking the kill. Wizard flips, yelling about my superb performance despite having dismal HP and what he considers a crappy spell selection. Barbarian tries to calm Wizard down, as does the Dungeon Master, but he's adamant that I need to go or he will, because he'll never, quote, play with some F-word gish bitch. So Wizard went. We ended up playing for a couple of weeks and wrapped up the adventure in a satisfying way. Overall, a mild horror story, but still horrible for that first session. It seems like Wizard wanted to be the best of the best, and the fact that OP's build was actually functioning pretty well after Wizard told them that their build sucked probably inflicted a blow to his overinflated ego. Then for a Wizard to demand that OP be booted or he is leaving after OP dealt the final blow to the beast is so petty and childish that it's no surprise that he wasn't there for the rest of the campaign. It sounds to me like the trash took itself out in this case. On to the next one. Story can't progress unless you do something. By Reddit user Algae Heavy. This is a story from several years ago, so forgive me if some of the details are a bit vague. I'd recently found the Call of Cthulhu RPG, and felt like giving it a go with my old gaming group. To ease myself into the game, I ran one of the scenarios from the book itself. At this point, all I remember is there was an old house, with some sort of horror demon locked in the attic, and the wards keeping it there were about to give out. So I gathered my group. We all have fun building characters, and we're off. The game started fairly well, with everyone investigating clues, role-playing with the NPCs, and being genuinely intrigued by what was going on. This is up until we reached the old house. When they began looking around, they heard a scratching noise from the attic. At this point, one of my players, let's call him Jay, says, "There's obviously something dangerous in the attic." I'm thinking this is good. The players aren't complete idiots and have started piecing the clues together. That is, until his next sentence. "It's obviously a trap, and I'm far too smart to fall for this trick. Nobody go up there." At this point, the game just ground to a complete halt as Jay refused to investigate the obvious clue and just sat there smugly talking about how he'd outsmarted me by not going into the attic. I believe at one point he called himself too genre savvy to go up there. Here's a tip. If the genre is mystery and you refuse to investigate, then perhaps you don't actually know how the genre works. Why would someone join a tabletop RPG to just not progress and, play the game? Also, why did the other players listen to this dude and not investigate the attic? Though, I have to say, if this did grind the game progression to a halt, the Dungeon Master could have just said that the words that were about to give out, that were holding the monster in place, did give out, and progress the story that way. Sure, some could say that this is railroading and taking away the player's agency, but I would say that there is no player agency if said player isn't playing the game. Though, what do y'all think on this one? Let's move on. Problem player loves monologuing and hates democracy. By Reddit user TSH Crossbow. The main players in this story are me as me, and Star as the problem player. About a year ago, I saw a looking for game post on Discord in a server that I'm in. I messaged the game master and had a quick interview, after which I got invited to the game. I made a character, backstory, and all that jazz. The next week, we had a session .5 where the game master went over his expectations, and we had a mini session. Everything was going great for the next few sessions. The party went off to fight a cult related to Star's backstory, and that's where the problem started. Whenever anyone interacted with anything from Star's backstory, they got oddly defensive. For example, I pocketed a vial of the magical steroids that the cult was making, and even though Star wasn't even around for this, they yelled at me about it out of game for about 3 hours. Fast forward to after we dealt with the cult and were killing their leader. Star spent 8+ minutes, yes, I timed it, monologuing about how this is revenge for killing their family. After that, we talked to the city council about what to do with that part of the city. We had 2 options, either help or destroy the bad part of the city. Everyone but Star wanted to help, so we had a vote. Star got pissed that they didn't get their way and yelled at us out of game until one of the players dropped out of the voice chat. For a while, we didn't have any more incidents in the game, except for the 10+ minute monologue that we occasionally got from Star, because we stopped dealing with Star's backstory and moved on to the main story. Out of the game, however, Star would fight with anyone who disagreed with them. If you didn't think wizards were the best class in the game, they would scold you because you were wrong. If you liked to play rangers, well, you were an idiot because that class sucked, according to Star. If you wanted to do something that wasn't rules as written, you were a horrible person for even suggesting it, and not knowing niche rulings off the top of your head. The last incident happened when we were fighting a boss. The boss was dealing heavy damage to all of us, but we were managing to fight it until it landed 1 attack on Star. So what did the optimized, super amazing Giga Chad Star do? They ran away, leaving the party to die. Luckily, the barbarian landed a crit and killed the boss. Star took this opportunity to monologue at the boss from 90 feet away. When the game master said that they were almost outside the dungeon and that there was no way anyone could see or hear them, they sulked and said that they would shut up because no one wants to talk to me anyway. Afterwards, Star had a meltdown in the Discord server, saying that no one liked them, that people ruined Star's backstory by voting, and that everyone was attacking them. We agreed to try and be nicer to Star, and to leave any choice related to their backstory up to them. Mind you, their backstory takes place in the hub city of this world, and Star effectively wanted total control over the city, to the point where they were trying to appoint people to the council. But was that enough? Of course not. Star demanded that our votes get revoked by the city council, and only theirs stay, as well as executing my character for taking the steroids that their character didn't know I took. After everyone told them that they were being effing ridiculous, they had another tantrum and left the game. I don't think anything of value was lost that day. But they say, if you listen closely, You can hear Star monologuing in the wind. Well, I have to say that OP's naming convention for Star is spot on. Definitely some heavy main character syndrome going on there. It's always good for a dungeon master to include characters' backstories into the overarching narrative of the campaign, but it seemed like Star thought that this meant that he was the main character. Then there was the condescending arguments about what classes are good, and calling people idiots for what they played. At that point, if I was the dungeon master, I would have put a stop to that. But instead, it sounds like they just gave in order to stop the whining. But when given an inch, Star took a mile by demanding to be in charge of the city's council, and even using that to try to kill OP's character because of metagaming knowledge. So yeah, I agree with OP that nothing of value was lost when Star decided to bounce. Let's move on to today's final story. Is it so hard to read the player recruitment post? By Reddit user TigerKirby215. I don't know if this post is appropriate to this sub. Honestly, it barely qualifies as a horror story, but it is tabletop RPG related, and just something I wanted to vent about. I'm currently looking for new players in a variety of Discord servers I'm in, and I have a fairly simple rule for these ads. I proverbially call it the Fox Clause, because I ask people to send me pictures of foxes, but I basically hide a message in the ad that asks players applying to send me a password, or a passivage I guess, to show that they read the thread. I saw a suggestion on Reddit to put these things in campaign listings, and have done it for all of my campaigns as a way to weed out players I can't rely on. Because simply put, if I can't trust you to even read the campaign ad properly, how can I trust you to be a good player? The sheer amount of messages I get from people who can't see this simple request is crazy. I think a solid 90% of the messages I get are immediately thrown into the trash because people can't be bothered to even read the damn recruitment post. And perhaps it's just negativity bias talking, but whenever I get messages without fox pictures, they're always written in the bog standard, "Hey, I saw your D&D game ad. Do you still have space available?" format, which makes me even further doubt if they read the post. So I guess this is a word of advice for anyone looking for games online. Read the damn posts for the game that you're trying to join. Like, it's really not that hard. Wow, I do have to say that is a pretty crafty idea for anyone posting a recruitment ad for players, and to make sure that they read everything. It would seem to wean out the players that wouldn't really pay attention to the game. It's surprising how many didn't do what was stated in OP's game listing. Like OP said, it's really not that big of an ask for people looking for games to read what the game will be, and what rules will be set. Here's hoping that OP gets more people applying for their game, but with fox pictures in tow. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.